That day seems like it was yesterday to me. My name is Ava, and that day, even though I was only 6 years old, altered my life forever. Mom and I were alone in our house as Dad had left on another business trip. The doorbell rang when I was in the living room playing with my dolls. Mom hurried to respond, her face beaming with joy upon recognizing the person. She said, "Ava, honey, go to your room and play," her voice trembling with anticipation. I followed her instructions, but my curiosity overcame me. Glancing around the corner, I noticed a tall man that I didn't know. Mom was moving quicker than I had ever seen her move, hurrying to stuff clothes into a suitcase. Mom quickly packed her bag and made her way to the door. I emerged from my hiding place, feeling both afraid and bewildered. I said, "Mommy, where are you going?" She looked away from me as she continued, "Sweetheart, I have to go away for a while. Be a good girl for Daddy, okay?" And then she was gone without warning. Nothing except the sound of a car engine beginning and then dying away. No hug, no kiss, farewell. I waited for her to return while I stood there looking at the locked door, but she never did. The house felt more spacious and empty than it had ever felt. As darkness fell, my fear increased. I reached for the light switches, but my height prevented me from turning on the lights. I felt like the darkness was closing in on me as I began to cry. "Mommy? Daddy?" I called out repeatedly, but nobody answered. I have no idea how many days have gone by. I was dehydrated and hungry, and I could feel demons lurking in the shadows, ready to devour me. I sobbed till my eyes dried out, then cowered down in a corner, trembling in terror. I heard voices outside at last. Mrs. Jeremy, our neighbor, was engaged in conversation. "I've been hearing a child crying for days," she stated. "I'm worried something might have happened." The door flew open, and all of a sudden my dad, the neighbors, and police officers were inside the house. He exclaimed, "Ava," and gathered me into his arms. "Oh God, Ava, I'm so sorry." Weeping with relief over his shoulder, I clung to him. A policeman was carrying a piece of paper as I noticed. "Mr. James, I think you should read this," the policeman stated gravely. Dad let me down gently and picked up the note. His face dropped as he read it. It seemed as though years had gone by in the blink of an eye. "She's gone," he said. "Amy has left. She moved away from us." The following few weeks flew by. Dad came to be with me. He took time off work. We had a full house of visitors, including friends, family, and a kind woman Dad claimed to be a child psychologist. Dad was informed by the psychologist that Ava had experienced trauma. It's normal for her to have some fears and anxieties after what happened. And my anxieties, oh my, were real. Without a light on, I was too afraid of the dark to sleep. Every time Dad had to go, I would freak out because I thought he would not return either. The fear never ever left me. It became an inherent part of my identity, much like my green eyes and brown hair. I became Ava James, the girl who was abandoned by her mother, the girl who was terrified of the dark, and the girl who was terrified of being alone. Days became weeks, and weeks became months, until life began to feel normal once more, just not the same kind of normal. Dad and I joined forces to navigate this new world without Mom as a team of two. He became proficient at braiding my hair after learning how to do it. He wasn't very good at first. I mastered the art of making his favorite cup of coffee. Then Dad's meeting with Lauren altered everything. He first introduced me to her when I was 8 years old. Lauren immediately put me at ease with her lovely smile and compassionate gaze. Lauren settled into our lives as a regular throughout the ensuing weeks. I couldn't express how much I appreciated that she didn't try to take the place of my mother. Rather, she established her own position inside our small family. I once overheard Dad on the phone with her. "It's probably time, Lauren. Are you going to live with us?" Within a week, Lauren took over. Instead of attempting to be my mother, she developed into a friend, which is equally as significant. She did a great job braiding my hair, assisted me with my homework, and always made sure my room had a nightlight. As the years went by, more changes occurred. After Dad's business took off, we found ourselves in a posh neighborhood and a large new home. I have a private room with a view of the rear pool and a walk-in closet. Still, certain things remained the same. Even so, I used the nightlight to sleep. I used to become nervous whenever Dad went on a business trip, and occasionally I would catch him staring at old pictures of Mom late at night. My 11th birthday began just like any other. Pancakes were Lauren's special birthday present for me, and I woke up to the fragrance of them. Dad had just got home from work, and we were having a little get-together later. Up until the doorbell rang, everything appeared to be ideal. I froze as soon as I entered the living room. My mother was standing there, obviously older than she actually was. Adjacent to her was a young child, perhaps 6 years old, gazing around with big eyes while clutching a teddy bear. "Amy," Dad responded sharply. "What are you doing here?" Mom inhaled deeply. "I sincerely apologize for everything, Larry. I am aware that I have no business being here, however." She gave the young girl a gesture. "My name is Maria. She is your offspring." There was silence in the room. I experienced difficulty breathing. Dad's expression wavered between shock, wrath, incredulity, and something more. "Again, my daughter?" he asked. Mom gave a nod. When I departed, I was expecting. I swear I had no idea at the time. "I've messed up so much, Larry. Maria needs to know who her father is, and I'm not pleading with you for forgiveness." I saw Dad bend over to put himself at the small girl's level. Saying, "Hi, Maria," he spoke quietly. "I'm your dad." Maria timidly glanced up at him. "Hi," she said in a whisper. I saw pale-faced Lauren waiting at the doorway while Dad spoke with Maria. She turned and hurriedly moved on. I wanted to go with her, but I felt immobile. The next few hours were a haze, filled with tears, heated voices, and a lot of adult talks that I wasn't meant to hear. I hid in my room and tried to make sense of everything by putting my knees up against my chest. Dad came over to chat to me later that night. He sat on the edge of my bed and said, "Ava, I know this is a lot to take in. While your mother has made some serious errors, Maria is innocent in all of this. You have a sister named her. For Maria's sake, I've made the decision to give your mom another shot." I observed via my window the following day as Lauren loaded her car. She raised her head to see me staring at her with tears in her eyes. She gave a farewell wave. I returned her wave, feeling as though a piece of myself was going with her. That same day, Mom and Maria moved in. Mom took over her former spot in Dad's room, and Maria occupied the guest room. She felt as though she was wiping out the previous 6 years as if they had never happened. The ensuing years were challenging. My mother had returned, but it was not the joyous family get-together I had imagined. I may have fantasized about being close to my mother when I was younger, but it never truly materialized. She loved Maria dearly and showered her with affection, but there remained a constant barrier between us and an enduring uneasiness. Maria didn't ask to get involved in this complex scenario. She was only a little child. It was difficult, especially when I observed how seamlessly she integrated into Mom and Dad's lives, in a manner that I never seemed to be able to. By the time I turned 19, I was more than ready to leave for college. I decided to study zoology because animals were always easier for me to understand than people. They didn't judge, they didn't have complicated emotions, and they didn't come with messy family histories. They just were. The day I left for college was bittersweet. Dad hugged me tightly, his eyes misty. "I'm so proud of you, Ava," he said. "You're going to do great things." Mom gave me an awkward pat on the shoulder and said, "Good luck," but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Maria, now 14, rolled her eyes and muttered, "Finally, I get my own room." I pretended not to hear her and focused on Dad's warm embrace. College was a relief. For the first time, I was away from the tension at home and the constant reminder of my complicated family situation. I threw myself into my studies, finding peace in the world of animals and nature. But even though I did well in school, I struggled socially. Years of feeling like an outsider in my own family had left a mark. I was quiet, reserved, and always afraid of getting too close to people. What if they left, like Mom had? What if they replaced me, like Maria seemed to have done? Instead, I found comfort at the small zoo on campus, where I volunteered in my spare time, caring for the animals. There was a particularly grumpy old llama named Larry who became my favorite. He didn't like most people, but he seemed to tolerate me. The years at college went by quickly, and before I knew it, I was graduating. As I stood in my cap and gown, diploma in hand, I scanned the crowd. Dad was there, beaming with pride. Mom and Maria were there too, clapping politely. "Congratulations, Iva," Mom said stiffly. "Your father and I have been talking, and well, we think it's time you started looking for your own place. You know, spread your wings." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I looked at Dad, hoping he would disagree with Mom, but he just looked away, his face full of pain. "Right," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course, I'll start looking right away." The days after my graduation were tense. I was back in my childhood home, but it didn't feel welcoming at all. Dad tried his best to make me feel comfortable, but Mom and Maria made it clear that I was not wanted there. "Ava, have you started looking for jobs yet?" Mom would ask during breakfast, her tone pretending to be sweet. "You know it's important to get your foot in the door early." Maria would add with a smirk, "Yeah, and maybe you could find your own place too. It's getting kind of cramped around here." Nights were the hardest. I still needed my nightlight to sleep, something Maria didn't miss. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, she barged into my room. "Seriously," she scoffed, pointing at my nightlight. "You're 23, and you still need that? No wonder you don't have any friends." I felt my cheeks burn with shame. "Leave me alone, Maria," I muttered, but she wasn't finished. The next day at dinner, she brought it up again, this time in front of everyone. "Hey, Mom, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Don't you think Ava should see a therapist or something? I mean, she's an adult who's afraid of the dark and can't make friends. That's not normal, right?" Something inside me snapped. Years of bottled-up hurt and anger burst out. "You want to know why I'm like this, Maria?" I said, my voice shaking. "It's because when I was 6, my mother left me alone in a dark, empty house for days. Do you have any idea what that does to a child?" The table went silent. Dad stared down at his plate, his face full of guilt and pain. Mom's eyes widened in shock and then quickly filled with tears. "How dare you?" she cried, her voice rising dramatically. "How can you be so cruel and vindictive? I've tried so hard to make amends, to be a family again, and this is how you repay me." As Mom continued her tearful rant, Maria smirked triumphantly. I realized something. I couldn't live here anymore. This wasn't my home, and these people, they weren't my family. Not really. From that day on, I threw myself into job hunting with new determination. Finally, a glimmer of hope. I had an interview scheduled at a small wildlife rehabilitation center. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. I left the house that morning feeling cautiously optimistic. But when I arrived, I found a hastily scribbled note on the door. "Interviews canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. We apologize for the inconvenience." Disappointed, I headed home earlier than expected. I unlocked the front door and heard voices coming from the living room, Mom and Maria, deep in conversation. I was about to let them know I was home when I heard my name. If Ava wasn't around at all, Maria was saying, it's not fair that she gets any of Dad's money. She's not even really part of this family." "I know, sweetie," Mom replied in a calming voice, "but we have to be patient. Once she moves out, it'll be easier to convince your father to change his will. We just need to keep pushing her to leave." It felt like a bucket of ice water had been poured over me. They didn't just want me out of the house, they wanted me out of the family entirely, and they were after my inheritance too. I sat on my bed, my mind racing. What should I do? Should I tell Dad? But would he believe me over Mom and Maria? He had forgiven Mom for leaving us before, and he loved them both. Maybe he'd take their side. My first bit of luck came when I saw a job posting for the Oklahoma City Zoo. They needed a zoologist to help with their wildlife rehabilitation program. It wasn't a fancy job, but it was exactly what I had been trained for. I sent in my application right away, and to my surprise and happiness, I got called in for an interview. On the day of the interview, I stood in front of the zoo's main gate, taking deep breaths to calm my nerves. The interview went better than I could have imagined. The head zoologist, Dr. Frank, seemed impressed with my knowledge and passion. "You've got the job, Ava," she said with a warm smile. "Welcome to the team." I could have cried with relief. Finally, something was going right. Working at the zoo was everything I'd hoped for and more. I spent my days caring for injured wildlife, educating visitors about conservation, and even helping with research projects. In the evenings, I'd return to my tiny apartment, which I was able to rent with the money I saved. To combat loneliness, I started joining online forums for animal lovers and people with similar interests. That's where I met Scott. Scott was from the same city, shared my love for animals, and had a great sense of humor that made me laugh even on my toughest days. We started chatting regularly, sharing stories about our day, and discussing everything from the latest conservation efforts to our favorite books. One day, Scott suggested we exchange photos. With trembling hands, I sent him a recent picture of me at the zoo. He replied with a photo of himself. He had kind eyes and a warm smile that made my heart skip a beat. But as much as I enjoyed our conversations, the idea of meeting in person or even admitting my growing feelings scared me. What if he rejected me once he got to know the real me? What if he left, just like Mom did? Around this time, I started talking with Hannah, a girl I met on a support forum for people with childhood trauma. She understood my fears in a way no one else had before. "You know what helps me?" Hannah wrote. "One day, I write emails to the people I can't talk to in real life. I pour out everything I'm feeling, all the things I wish I could say, but I don't send them. I just save them as drafts. It's really healing. Taking Hannah's advice, I started writing emails to Dad. In them, I told him everything. How I overheard Mom and Maria's conversation, how I was hurt that he didn't seem to notice me anymore, and how I felt like an outsider in my own family. I also started writing to Scott. In these emails, I allowed myself to be vulnerable in a way I couldn't be in our chats. Scott, I wrote, I think I'm falling for you, but I'm scared. I'm scared of letting anyone get close to me. I'm scared of being hurt again. These emails too remained unsent, my feelings safely tucked away in my drafts folder. Dad would call occasionally, his voice a mix of concern and confusion. Ava, honey, he'd say, why don't you come over for dinner this weekend? We miss you. Each time, I'd come up with an excuse. Sorry, Dad, I've got a big project at work. Or, I'm not feeling well this week. Maybe next time. Then one Thursday afternoon, I was at the mall picking up some essentials when I heard a familiar voice call my name. Ava, is that you? I turned around, and there she was, Lauren, my former stepmother. She looked older, but her kind eyes were just the same. Before I knew it, we were hugging, years of separation melting away in an instant. That's when I noticed a young boy standing beside her, looking up at us curiously. This is my nephew, Justin, Lauren explained, ruffling the boy's hair affectionately. I'm raising him now. Lauren's voice was soft. My sister passed away last year. Over coffee, Lauren filled me in on her life after she and Dad split up. She had been on her own until her sister's death left Justin in her care. After that, we started meeting regularly, sometimes just the two of us, sometimes with Justin. One day, Lauren called and urgently asked me to look after Justin for the evening. Justin arrived at my apartment, backpack and towel. As I prepared dinner in my tiny kitchen, I could hear him tapping away on my laptop in the living room. I told him he could play the games if he finished his homework. When I came out of the kitchen with 2 plates of spaghetti, I found Justin looking guilty, his face pale. Ava, he said, his voice trembling. I did something bad. I was curious. And I saw these emails in your drafts folder, and I sent them, all of them. I'm so sorry. The world seemed to spin around me. Those emails, my private thoughts, my deepest feelings, had been sent out into the world, to Dad and to Scott. I felt like I couldn't breathe. That night, after Justin left, I lay in bed, my mind racing. What would Dad think? And Scott, oh God, Scott. My phone pinged with a message notification. It was from Scott, but I couldn't bring myself to read it. What if he was disgusted by my feelings? What if he never wanted to speak to me again? I barely slept that night, tossing and turning, imagining all the worst-case scenarios. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Dad. Ava, he said, his voice serious. We need to talk. Can you meet me at the cafe near your old high school? My heart pounded as I sat across from Dad in the small cafe. He looked tired, his face showing lines I hadn't noticed before. I got your emails, he said quietly. Ava, I had no idea you were feeling this way. About your mother, about Maria, about everything. I couldn't meet his eyes, feeling a mix of shame and fear inside me. Ava, look at me, Dad said, his voice gentle but firm. I looked up, surprised to see tears in his eyes. I love you more than anything in this world. I'm so sorry. I made you feel like you weren't important to me. That was never, ever my intention. We talked for hours. Really talked. In a way we hadn't in years. We talked about Mom's return, about Maria, and about how I had felt pushed aside and forgotten. Dad listened. Really listened, occasionally wiping away a tear. Finally, he stood up. I need some time to process all this, he said. But Ava, we're going to figure this out. You and me. As I watched him walk away, I felt a mix of relief and nervousness. What was going to happen now? But I didn't have much time to think about it, because my phone rang again. It was Scott. Ava, he said, his voice warm but a little nervous. I got your email, and I feel the same way. I've been too scared to say it, but I really like you. Would you like to meet for coffee? My heart soared. Yes, I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. I'd love to. The next day, I met Scott at a small coffee shop. He was even more handsome in person, with a kind smile that put me at ease right away. We talked for hours about our fears, dreams, and pasts. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen and understood. As the autumn leaves began to fall, my phone rang one crisp morning. It was Dad. Ava, he said, his voice warm, but with something serious underneath. I'd like you to come to Thanksgiving dinner. It's important to me that you're there. Something in his tone made me agree. Thanksgiving Day arrived, and I stood on the doorstep of my childhood home, my heart pounding. Scott had offered to come with me for support, but I felt this was something I needed to face on my own. Mom opened the door, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Ava, how nice of you to join us. Maria, lounging on the couch, barely looked up from her phone. Oh, you came. Dad emerged from the kitchen and hugged me warmly. I'm glad you're here, sweetheart, he whispered. As we sat down to dinner, the tension was thick. Mom and Maria exchanged glances, their smiles forced and fake, but Dad seemed unusually calm. Just as Mom started to serve Oklahoma, Dad cleared his throat. Before we begin, there's something we need to discuss, he stated. He extracted a big manila folder from behind his chair by reaching down. Dad started setting papers out on the table. Amy Maria, he replied, I've known for a while that something wasn't right, so I did some investigating. A bank statement was held up by him. First, I discovered regular withdrawals from our accounts that I didn't make. Quite substantial amounts, in fact. Mama's face went pale, and all of a sudden, Maria was fascinated by her dish. Dad went on, taking out a second document. I also employed Amy, a private investigator. He gave you photographic proof of your meetings at the motel in Oklahoma City with a certain individual. Mom let out a gasp and reached for her mouth. Hey, Larry, I could provide an explanation. But Dad was far from done. His hand trembling a little, he took out one last document. I had a DNA test done, Dad muttered. Maria isn't my biological daughter. There was silence in the room. Maria let go of her phone, which fell to the ground with a crash. Mom appeared as if she could pass out. Dad said, maintaining a steady tone despite the emotion in his eyes. I've already spoken to my lawyer, he added. Amy, I'm filing for divorce, and I'm afraid I'll have to ask both you and Maria to leave this house. Mom spoke up again, her shock giving way to rage. This is not something you can accomplish. I'll accept you for everything that you possess. Dad's face became stern. You won't, Amy, in reality. I'll countersue you and demand that you return all of the money you've taken, plus the money I spent raising Maria, if you try to claim any property. I have a very solid case, my lawyer tells me. As Mom realized how bad the situation was, tears fell down her face. As her life crumbled around her, Maria sat in startled stillness. Over the next few days, Mom and Maria moved out. My father and I started to mend our relationship, and now it's stronger than ever. We began having long discussions, dinners every week, and even started organizing a road trip as father and daughter. Dad mentioned Lauren hesitantly one day with coffee. He confessed, "I've been thinking a lot about the past and the mistakes I made." I apologized to Lauren over email. We've been getting together over coffee to discuss various issues. Sincerely glad for him, I smiled. That's fantastic, Dad. Lauren is a very remarkable woman. For my part, my relationship with Scott was going more smoothly than I could have ever dreamed. He was kind, understanding, and patient with my fears and insecurities. I was even beginning to work through my problems in therapy with his help.